the status quo is not okay. It seems a little bit strange that that's become such a central sentiment, given that we're actually ecstatic at the progress that's been made in the last 10 to 15 years, and as Richard Feacham explained, over now many decades. So many lives saved, so much poverty averted, so much human opportunity provided by that success. So, a seemingly kind of negative, challenging comment like the status quo is not okay, business as usual won't do it, is a little bit odd. Why do you think it's resonated so strongly with us? Is it this issue of stalling? That good progress that I just referred to is clearly flatlining in certain circumstances. And all that means with what we know about resurgence and so on. Is it simply that despite the progress, there's still a monumental human tragedy playing out every day? I have done a little bit of media in the last week or two over this conference, and one of those encounters stayed with me. It was morning breakfast, television, and it was a good interview from two interviews on the ABC, our national broadcaster that I like, and I got a good hearing. And I left, though, feeling a bit uncomfortable. And I was driving home thinking, why was I a bit uncomfortable? During that interview, at the bottom of the caption at the bottom of my interview related to the shooting deaths, the tragic shooting deaths of 5 people in the town outside of Washington. That was their breaking news story for that morning. Understandably big issue. But I realised that I was uncomfortable because I'd been treated almost like the human interest lighter story to have in the context of this tragic shooting that was going on. Even though I pointed out during the interview that 1,200 tragic deaths will occur just in that one day. And it'll happen again tomorrow, and it'll happen again the day after. So there's been a lot of talk about the invisibility of malaria. So is the status quo is not okay because of our deep sense of outrage at that? I think there's another way of looking at it that was captured by Richard Feacham pretty well, that is a little bit of the same approach to the convening of this Congress. It's been mentioned a couple of times now that when you try to do something really ambitious, go to the moon. My own living example that I observed was the sequencing of the human genome. When you try to do something really ambitious, you've got a couple of options. You get, the analogy Richard used was get all your ducks in a row first and then commit. Or you commit with almost having no idea how you're going to get there, and then you try and get all your ducks in a row. There's been debate about whether the community's committed to elimination and eradication. I don't think there's any debate anymore. We've made a decision as a community. That decision has been made. The truth of the matter is, though, we don't really know how to do it. We don't have all our ducks in a row, technologically and in other places. There's huge challenges to deliver, even by some of the timeframes that we're discussing. So I think that that's the status quo is not okay sentiment that we should take away. A positive one around the commitment that we've made and the urgency, the word that Helen just used, that comes with not quite knowing how to do it, but knowing that so many lives, so much suffering depends on us acting, and acting vigorously and with a sense of uncomfortableness all the time. Now, we can get caught up in specifics of what those ducks are. And we heard a lot of the specifics of what we need, all of which are absolutely true. I think it's important too, though, and this is what the statement tries to capture, is not the specifics as much as the culture that's going to drive our response. Culture and defining the values that we as a community have is what will give us the motivation to finish the job in the countries that need the last mile to be achieved, and to tackle, as was said a number of times today, the hardest first, the hardest now. And so the points relating to not just engaging, but putting the vulnerable community, the ones that are the least listened to, at the head of the table. For example, to innovate and to collaborate. And what I mean by collaborate is what's exemplified, I think, in this meeting, by disparate groups actually getting to know each other and then value one another prior to deciding how we can collaborate. These values are things that we can all embrace. We don't need to know all the specifics. We can embrace them and create an atmosphere and an environment of desperation trying to achieve what we've all collectively committed to. So I hope that we do hold another meeting or something along these lines, and we hold ourselves to account against the commitments that are in this statement of action that you all have committed to. My main job now is just to say a few words of thanks. And if I could have the slides that do that. Thank you. There's a lot of people to thank for a meeting of this sort. It's really hard to know where to start. I'm going to tell you where, beyond Alan Cowman, Helen Evans and myself getting together, the two other important groups that I'll mention in a moment, our first step was to get as many of the international community as we could think of on board, and we formed an international advisory board. And some of you were very active, and some of you were not, and that was mostly our fault. But having all of your names and your stated support by signing up was really important to us, to give us the impetus to get going. So thank you to the International Advisory Board, who basically said it's a good idea, go for it. There was a program organising committee that I see myself as the top of the list. I was actually the least relevant person on this committee. Hugely grateful to this group and for the organisations that were behind some of these people, particularly Appelma. They worked enormous hours over the course of the last year, but for the last 6 months or so, most of them have done almost nothing else. It was a complex program to put together. The idea of mixing sessions, mixing people in sessions who would never normally talk to one another and yet they needed to speak under a single theme, was a new concept for all of us. I'd especially like to thank the two groups who did come together with Helen, Alan and myself at the beginning. That's the Melbourne Convention Exhibition Centre, which is an arm really of the State Government of Victoria. Peter King, who heads that, but particularly Megan and Paula have been actively involved. And to ASN Events,